Hi everyone, Steve here from RSM, and welcome to the first edition of our Coffee Conversation series for 2021. Today it's a real privilege for me. I'm joined by Li Cunxin, Artistic Director of the Queensland Ballet. It's been quite a long time, Li, since we've caught up, and it's good to finally do it in a face-to-face sense. A little bit about Li. He really needs very little introduction, and he will tell us a little of himself very, very shortly. As I mentioned, Artistic Director of the Queensland Ballet, stockbroker, dancer, mentor, and inspiration to many. So Li, thank you again for joining me. This is all about having a casual chat over a coffee. Perhaps you could share with us what you're drinking today.
I'm drinking tea, actually. I never grew to like coffee very much, even though I've traveled around the world to places like France and Italy, which reportedly make the best coffee. But every time I tasted them, I never liked it. I just thought something was, I love the smell of it. But once I tasted it, there's some kind of adverse reaction with me. So it never really gelled with me. But so I just went with my usual Chinese tea.
Very good. And always good to avoid the adverse reactions. So Li, thanks again. I really appreciate you joining me today. Perhaps before we sort of get started into the conversation, and as I say, you need very little introduction to many people, but if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to this point.
Sure. Well, I was born in China, in communist China, in 1961. I was born into a peasant family. Virtually, my parents had no education, never read or write. I was the sixth of seven peasant sons. We were farming families. When you're talking about farming, there's no tractors, there's no farming equipment. It's virtually just very primitive stuff to grow wheat and corn stuff. And the time I was born in China was a particularly challenging time where virtually the estimate was anywhere between 35 to 50 million people died of starvation during a 3-year period. It was the precise 3-year period I was born into. And so when I grew up was extreme poverty. We were fighting for survival. Virtually every mealtime was a challenge for my poor mother. She just desperately prayed and hoped none of her 7 children would die of starvation or a simple disease of some kind, like so many others across China. So for me, was really my childhood. It was fighting for survival on a daily basis. There's no heating, very little heating actually. In the wintertime, the temperature in my hometown could get down to anywhere between 15 to 20 degrees below zero at wintertime. And there's not enough warm clothes to wear because we were so poor. And there's no running water. We have to walk miles carrying buckets, heavy buckets of water home each day. So it was really under those kind of tough environment I grew up until when I was just about turning 11. One day I was going to school, and my school is really a little common shack. There's over 40 to 50 kids going to this little shack every morning. We would be running, racing after each other for about half an hour to throwing snowballs because the snow just covered the grounds. And then one morning, just an ordinary morning, we all had to wear thick quilted cotton pants our mothers have made for us. So we all looked like these round snowballs. We were sitting in this heatless, freezingly cold classroom, and with 4 pictures in front of us. And the pictures were Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Mao. So they were the 4 communist fathers. We learn about their political theories. They are our gods, really. And then it was just absolutely freezing. The wind outside was whirling, And we had no glass panels on the windows. So they plastered thin rice papers. So the natural sunlight could shine through because there's no electricity inside. And it was still very dark, so dark. But because the rice paper was so thin, and the strong wind blowing big snowflakes around, and the snowflakes will stick onto the paper, wetted, and the wind would just penetrate holes through it. So the wind just poured in. We all sitting there shivering. Now, what is supposed to keep us warm was our teacher told us to read this text 10 times in a row. And the text was, "We love you, Chairman Mao" text. And as though that was going to keep us warm. In the middle of that reading, 4 men were led into our classroom by the head of our school. They were introduced to us as Madame Mao's cultural advisors from the Beijing Dance Academy. And they were there to select talents to study ballet. We knew nothing about ballet. We had no idea about ballet because live performances, anything performing arts, was so far removed from our daily struggles for basic food and clothes. So then they asked to stand up to sing songs. The only kind of songs we're ever told and allowed to sing was "We Love You, Chairman Mao" kind of songs. So in the middle of that singing, these 4 men walk along the aisles and look at each person's faces, trying to get some vague idea of our physical body shape through our thick, snowball-like clothes. They passed me by without taking any notice. Out of the over 40 kids in the room that day, they singled out one girl. They asked her to follow them out of the classroom. Just as the last gentleman from that group was about to leave the room, my class teacher, we call her teacher Sun, she was standing by the door, and she did something very unusual. She stopped that last gentleman from Beijing from leaving the door. Says, "Excuse me, sir, what about that one?" And that one was me she was pointing at. And that moment changed my fate, changed my life. For many years, the funny thing was, for many years, throughout my life, I busy pursued my career, my big dreams. I never really thought to ask that teacher Sun, why did she ever single me out that day? Only when I was writing my autobiography, 2000, then that's the only time I really thought about it. And of course, I was absolutely dumbfounded that one small moment at that time changed everything for me. So then I tracked that teacher down in China, and I asked that teacher the question I should have asked her all those years before. I said, "Teacher Sun, can you please tell me, why did you do that? Why did you single me out that day?" And there's a long silence on the other side of the phone. And finally she said, "Li, for all these years I wondered, but I still don't know."
Wow.
So, just one of those moments, perhaps it's fate, perhaps just something tweaked in her mind, pointed me out. And I didn't think I was even her favorite student. and somehow that one simple act of hers just made all the difference in my life. So then after that, we went through this amazing audition process. They went through tens of millions of kids across China and selecting all these perfect bodies, perfect proportion of physicality, the most flexible people, with a performance face. If you have shorter arms, or if you have disproportionately short legs to the rest of your body, if you have a crooked nose, if you have anything, if you have a short neck,
wow.
You won't. If your ear sticks out like that, you won't be chosen. So eventually, they selected 44 that year, And I was one of the lucky 44 kids being chosen. The things they made us do, the physical tests they put us through, was some bodies were probably broken.
Wow.
It was so tough. But through that, so at one stage they threw my legs high up in the air. The other person held my other leg up, pinned me really against the corner of the wall. I couldn't move a single inch. And then they test how flexible I am in all directions, front, side, back. If you scream out with pain, which a lot of kids did, and you will be instantly disqualified. And it was probably their way to test how determined you are, what kind of a pain threshold you can tolerate. So I was a bit of a stubborn boy. I was a tough country boy. And I grew up with 5 older brothers and 1 young brother. We tumbled, we wrestled, we hit each other, we just, broke each other's arms, legs, and all that. And so for me, pain was just part of daily life almost. So then I was just turning 11. I was one of the lucky kids selected to go to Madame Mao's Beijing Dance Academy. She was the honorary artistic director. And of course, with Chairman Mao being the most incredible leader, and we got certain privileges. And she secretly loved ballet. So that was why. And she was the honorary director of the Beijing Dance Academy. And then I went to Beijing for 7 years of training. We started from 5:13 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night, 6 days a week we trained. But most people were surprised when I say to them, look, I hated ballet with passion. I hated it the first 2 to 3 years, which was very true. Absolutely, I had no interest in ballet. My whole childhood dream was to help my family. I did not see the connection, how ballet, the excruciating training, very unnatural training, and it, to me, was the boringest thing on earth, could ever help my family. Eventually, on the verge of being sent back home, virtually being fired, then this amazing teacher, which we're talking about leader, and he was a leader with such vision, such determination, and dare himself to dream big. And his dream was to help nurture and help produce, teach, coach a whole new generation of world-class Chinese dancers. But you probably know ballet is not even naturally Chinese. It's learned and adopted from the Western culture. So, but he was determined to help this group of young kids to become the best dancer of a truly world-class standard. And he drove us, he demanded the best, but at the same time he nurtured, he tried to discover just what makes that person, that boy, tick on that motivational level. So what does that boy dream about? What does he want to do in his lifetime? So eventually he discovered my dreams, which was to save my family. And that's the connection he made for me. To be able to help my family if I become a better dancer, and then in return, I will be able to send home my savings to save them from starvation, from dying from a simple disease. So it was then that light bulb turned on in my head. And then once I had a purpose, once I had an aim, then the rest was history. I was willing to work hard. I was considered very lazy before then. People wondered why was I never there. I didn't have the natural or the best natural attributes like some of my classmates, like natural jumps and turns and all that. In fact, I could never turn because I had experienced this most horrific motion sickness when I was a child. So start spinning, I just want to throw up. But to conquer that, I would hit myself in a dark dance studio like this. And I can't turn on the light at nighttime because we had all have to go to sleep. And if I turn on the light, I'll be discovered and sent back to bed again. So I would light this candle. In front of this little candle light, I kept on spinning for nights after night. Eventually, I conquered that motion sickness. I thought to myself, if I could turn with darkness around me, then once I have a light on stage, then I can turn brilliantly. And for my jumps, I would strap heavy sandbags on both my ankles, hop one-legged up and down on 4 levels of stairs, morning after morning, way before others were awake. So by the time people were awake at 5 or 5:30 in the mornings, I would already done my jumping session. So for quite a few years, I was not, sort of discovered. So I was eventually, I had the ability, strength to jump. Once I threw these sandbags away, I feel my legs as light as a feather. And once I conquered the motion sickness, and turns was relatively easy. So when I graduated at the end of the 7th year, I broke a school record in turning was widely considered the best dancer China had ever produced. So that was in 1979. And then, Steve, in life, one success can lead to another, at least can opening a new door for you, creating new possibilities in your lives, and also in return give you that very valuable self-confidence and self-esteem. And that's what being eventually rise to the top in my academy when I graduated. That success had truly opened a new door for me. When I just about to graduate, Ben Stevenson, the artistic director of the Houston Ballet, he was a former principal dancer with the Royal Ballet in London. And he was widely considered one of the top teachers and one of the most talented choreographers of his time in the world. So he was in America among the first cultural delegation under Nixon from America to China. And because of his fame, the Chinese cultural officials invited him to teach 2 master classes in my academy. And of course, immediately he saw my standard. So he offered 2 scholarships to study in the Houston Ballet Academy summer school. And I was one of the 2 being chosen. At that time, China was virtually only started to open up. It would take people roughly up to 2 years to get your passports, let alone visas. So the school official was virtually laughed at that notion that Ben Stevenson was ever going to get us there. So they didn't do anything about our visa or passport applications. And a few weeks later, they received this surprise phone call from the Chinese government, inquired about his invitations, about us going. What they didn't realize was Ben Stevenson had a very powerful friend on the board of the Houston Ballet at the time, and her name was Barbara Bush. So you probably recall Bush Sr. was the first special envoy being sent to China under Nixon. So he actually had a really good relationship with Deng Xiaoping. So he, of course, used that connection and inquired, and therefore our passports and visas very quickly were granted. We were ready to go. But there was not a major hurdle. At age 18, both the other student and me, we didn't speak a single word of English. So somewhere they found this English tutor, came in and gave us 2 days of crash English course. We struggled even with alphabets because there's such a huge difference between Chinese and English. There's absolutely no connection. Yeah. But during that time, I was determined to learn something, so I won't be just totally, with no knowledge of the language. So my best teacher was a Chinese and English dictionary. So I secretly swapped the covers around because we always had a red Chinese book, Mao's Chinese book. And so I swapped the red covers around. So every time I look at my dictionary, people thought I was reading Mao's little red book. So I won't get myself in trouble. And so eventually I learned some very useful words, I thought. And one of them was, oh dear me. And the second was, upon my soul. So it was just, it was very old fashioned. We were in America for 6 weeks in 1979. It was such a shock. It was an eye-opening experience. And the Western society, the way the Americans live, the freedom they enjoyed, I didn't comprehend. It was a total shock. Because for the first 18 years of my life, we were so brainwashed to believe we lived the most divine life under Mao. We were the luckiest kids and lived the most happiest lives and most prosperous lives, and where the Western world was, in such disarray and such difficult lives. So that was a huge jolt to the realities of, really jogged me out of reality for the first time. I thought, how could the two societies could be so different, where my family were still struggling for survival, for basic food, where you see the massive amount of waste in the Western world. We would be, the first night we were in America, we were taken to this fabulous Chinese restaurant. And the food is poured on, for the first time I tasted Peking duck, and halfway through the night, the food a lot of the dishes were untouched, but the food is still poured on. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why there's still a lot of food come on. And eventually I figured out, because before we left China, we were called into the Minister of Culture's office, and one of the cultural officials said to us, we know you don't speak much of English, but you are representing over 1 billion people in China. So you have to be careful what you say. You should always be very polite, and you never say the word no, because that's a negative word. You will offend people. You make the Chinese people look impolite and rude. So we said, sure. And so that night, throughout the night, our host kept asking us, are you still hungry? Of course, we didn't understand what he was saying. We kept saying, yes, yes, yes. And the food kept pouring on. But I think the point I'd like to make is, so eventually, of course, there's so much food end up not eaten, which was untouched. And where I would have just loved to take them home, but all that food was chucked. For me, it was just heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing story, Li, and perhaps if we wind the clock forward, I know there's an awful lot more that we could keep talking about, and I really appreciate that. Wind the clock forward now to Brisbane in 2021, just come out of 2020, which was a year many people I think would like to forget, and we'll get onto a little bit of that shortly. But more specifically around the Queensland Ballet, I mean, under your guidance, it's really become one of the preeminent ballet companies in the world, and I think it's a wonderful story. Could you tell us a little bit about the Queensland Ballet and the journey that you've been on with the ballet?
Sure. This is my 9th year. When I came in 2012, the company was relatively small. I feel there's enormous, even though the company is relatively weak financially, and I think the audience development was really in desperate need to build the infrastructure, the people infrastructure, and even physical real infrastructure. For example, the dancers didn't even have a decent dressing room stations. So I have to pull a few favors from my business contacts with Bunnings, for example, to ask them to donate simple mirror and lighting to fly our carpenter friend from Melbourne and to help the dancers building just decent dressing room stations. So before the performance, they can have a mirror and light to work with to make up rather than keep running to the bathroom and all push each other out of the way to get to the mirror. And starting from very humble beginning, I felt the company has enormous potential. The one thing I loved about my limited time, limited knowledge about Queensland Ballet, it had this incredible family spirit. People cared for each other and a sense of pride in what they do. Which is, I think, is a wonderful, wonderful quality. So, but at the same time, as a state, I felt people would embrace, would support if I could communicate a really exciting vision for them. That vision was to build a world-class, truly world-class ballet company. And I know for sure people have been traveling to London, to New York City, to even to Melbourne to see good quality, good standard productions, ballet productions. But why do we want to shortchange that experience for people in Queensland? Why not have it here? Why not have a truly world-class company, not only dancers of world-class, but productions of world-class, creatives of world-class, and the whole experience of world-class? It's doable. And because I had experienced that in my time, I know what that standard should be. So that was the vision, and that still is the vision, because that vision is never, you can never say, okay, I'm there now. Once you say that, and you're going to sit on your laurels.
Yes, yeah.
And I would never really, I do believe the company is at a world-class level, but are we there where I want to be? No. And even though today I might be pleased, but by the time I wake up tomorrow morning, there's a higher level to achieve. There's areas to improve. And I think that's the only way to keep better yourself, to keep improving. The minute you said, I have done it, the minute you're going to stop progressing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, such wise words and good counsel, and I think regardless of which facet of life we're talking about, it's so important.
So I think the growth, Steve, has been pretty phenomenal. Yeah. And just a few statistics. When I came, our company was around $5 million annual. And before COVID, our budget was $28 million. And our audience numbers were just absolutely has expanded tremendously, and so really truly reflected on the level of the community believing, supporting my vision, and really more now, I think people to compare what our dancers, our quality of the performances to some visiting companies. I think if people are honest, if they are knowledgeable, they would say Queensland Ballet is no less. In some ways, we might be better. So I'm very proud of that. But as I said, there's no way I think I've done it, because there's still incredible level, vision, yet to be realized.
No, that's wonderful. And as you say, it must make you incredibly proud to see where the company has come.
Yeah, and we come from 23 dancers when I first came. Now we are 60, and we are invited to perform around the world now. I think for us, this COVID hasn't done us any favors. For any performing art companies, we all suffered greatly. But for us, for me always, when there is a challenge, if there is a difficult situation, I inevitably see opportunities in disguise. And I think it is during the tough times, it really would test a company in a true way. And if you can rise above it, if you can overcome those challenges, then you'll be a much stronger company when you emerge from it. So it is an opportunity for us to focus even harder and to work even harder, to even have bolder vision.
And that's a wonderful segue, actually, Li, in terms of, because certainly the last 12 months or so has a fair share of challenges, I think, for all of us, particularly in the arts, more so than most segments in society. Could you share with us perhaps some of those challenges, and then perhaps also, as you say, which I think is such a wonderful message, that out of adversity, out of challenge comes opportunity, and it's up to us to find those and embrace those. So perhaps if you could share some of the challenges that you've seen, that you've had to deal with, with the company, and even more broadly than that, and then the opportunities. So they say every cloud has a silver lining. There's no doubt the pandemic cloud is a very dark one, and it's a very large one, and it's not going anywhere in a hurry. But would really appreciate your thoughts on those challenges and the opportunities that you've seen that have come out of it as well.
Sure. I think the biggest challenge for us with COVID, it was no doubt financial, because we millions of dollars worth of box office revenue was gone, and in the meantime, we have incurred a lot of expenses. Whether it's marketing the season, last year was supposed to be our 60th anniversary celebration. So the program we have painstakingly put together was very exciting. And we had some of the best international guest artists coming, creatives come to stage ballets, and suddenly gone in a puff of smoke. And then what is tough is obviously that during that lockdown period, to have these incredibly physically talented artists get locked down in these little apartments. Most of the dancers have very humbling little apartments, little spaces. So to keep them physically, mentally active and fit, and to keep their motivation going, and we had to do a lot. So the challenge for us was, how do we do that? And so starting from give them a piece of this target flooring to deliver to their homes, to make portable ballet bars, which I don't know any other company has gone to that length. So they have their normal, usual working little piece of working environment they can take home with them. And from endless phone calls checking on them, to give them daily online classes, practice classes. So the amount of activities we give them pretty much fill up most part of their day. And then we challenge them with the choreography. So we ask them to create new works based on the space they got, based on the theme of love. And so encourage them to be daring, to be creative. And we put 60 pieces we put on the online through our website. We created a special website called the Keep Magic Alive. And we very earnestly, we reach out to the wider community, world community, to come to enjoy our dance's creation. But at the same time, we appeal for people's help. We appeal for people to donate, to support us. We raised over $1 million for the month of June, which is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But what is incredible was through this, and a lot of dancers are so good at interpreting, being created on. The choreographer coming, creating on you, Steve. But if I ask you to create something, you feel very confronted, very insecure. You feel very exposed. But I'm so proud of them. They all went out to really really conquer their own fears. And some of the pieces were just sublime. Fantastic. So we then, not only we streamed them online, when the restrictions started to be lifted, we put some of the highlights of the 60 pieces into a program we performed at the Powerhouse. We called 60 Dancers, 60 Stories. It was so successful. I cried every performance I watched. It was not only the context made me emotional, the context of the COVID, coming out of COVID, but also the beauty. It was the creativity. It was just the beautiful choreography moved me. So we everywhere we performed it in Brisbane, we performed in Gold Coast, we performed in Sunshine Coast. Everywhere we performed it, people loved it, absolutely loved it. So it was a truly turned a negative, something very negative, something very unfortunate, to a positive experience. And what happened too was the collaboration aspect between the dancers and my staff. And everybody rallied together. There's no hierarchy. Everybody worked to create something magical. And truly that experience had brought our team more together. And I think COVID had brought our whole company more together. We worked hard to really collaborate. We worked hard to communicate. We worked hard to become even more of a family as one team. And that was the most positive thing coming out of it. Even though it was painful, even though we have to let some people go, because the family environment is such, when you lose one person, you affect quite a few others.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's extraordinary, Li, and extraordinary to hear such a positive story out of something, so negative in so many ways. But look, really appreciate your time today, Li. I know you're a very busy man. Always wonderful to chat to you. So inspiring to hear from you and hear your story again. Great to catch up. And for everyone out there watching, I'm sure you learned some fascinating insights then, and sure, if there's anything that you wish to explore a little bit further, you know where I am. Feel free to reach out. Thank you again for joining us for this first and I'd say very special episode for 21. And Li, thank you once again. An absolute pleasure as always to talk to you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.